Good morning, children. Welcome back to the social session. Children, in the last class, there was an introduction about the history. We divided the history into four divisions. That was ancient history, medieval history, and modern history. And modern history, the pre-modern history or the early modern history, and the modern history we have divided. And we have classified it as per the chronology. Chronology means as per the years we have divided. Up to 400 AD it is called as ancient. From 400 to 1300 AD we call it as a medieval. From 13 to 1800 AD we call it as a pre-modern age or the early modern age. And from the 1800 to the present time we call it as a modern age. So we learn about the historical facts that have taken place in the early modern age and the modern age. Some of the democratic and nationalistic revolutions that took place during the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries we shall learn under it. So under this unit we learn the three important revolutions that has changed the entire course of the history of the world. The world history got changed because of these three revolutions. The first one is about the glorious revolution, children, that has taken place in Britain. Okay, this revolution we will understand under this unit, the glorious revolution of Britain. Okay, and this glorious revolution is also called as a bloodless revolution because not an drop of blood has come out during this revolution. For that reason this glorious revolution is also called as a bloodless revolution. The second revolution we discuss here is the American War of Independence. How America has won its American War of Independence, how they have won their independence. We'll understand the entire course of their history. And third one and the bigger one and the most important one is the French Revolution. French Revolution. So these are the three things which we shall read under this unit. And in order to understand about the Britain Glorious Revolution, first you should know its background. Today we used an idea of a democratic form of government in which elections will be held periodically and elected representatives will make the laws and they run the government. They are the people that government will run those people will run the government. All the citizens will have the fundamental rights and they are treated equals by law in today's government. And however, this kind of democracy was not there in the earlier times during the period of 17th, 18th and 19th. In the early 19th centuries, you don't find such kind of democratic governments in many of the countries. And countries were ruled by the kings and queens or the emperors who made laws at their will, as their wish. They have prepared the laws and they have ruled the society. So they have divided the society into high caste and low caste or estates, and each were given some kind of privileges. Equality was not there. There were given some kind of privileges and obligations were there for a few sections of the people. And in this chapter we will read briefly about how people fought to build a democratic government or a democratic political system and achieve the social equality in the society, especially in the European countries. How this equality has been achieved with the revolutions we will see under this unit. So likewise, like any other country, Europe, that is England, was also ruled by the kings and queens. Sir, even today also it is ruled by the king and queen, but no. Even though queen is the head of the English government, but it is being ruled by the prime minister who is elected by the people. So English, that is England, is being ruled by the kings and queens at the beginning of the 17th century. And England is being ruled by the kings of Tudor dynasty. Which dynasty people are ruling this England? Tudor dynasty people. Tudor dynasty people were ruling England. And but the Tudor kings refused. At that time the Pope was the head of the Roman Catholic Church, and but the Tudor kings refused to accept the authority of the Pope. And England is a Christian country, you know it very well. So Roman Catholic Church head is the Pope, but the Tudor kings never accepted the authority of the Pope. This was in a sense the beginning of the English nationalism, the idea of democratic government, or the idea that England should be independent of the Pope and the Roman Catholic society. And soon another new conflict started between the parliament and the king, who was more powerful in the kingdom. the parliament and the king, there was a new dispute. The parliament was dominated by the representatives of landowners, merchants, and the king needed the approval of this parliament in order to impose any tax on the society. So let us see how this conflict led to the establishment of a democratic government in India now. And first we shall see about the civil war which took place in England, which we call it as a glorious revolution. It was in the 1603, children. It was in 1603 that James I of Stuart dynasty was ruling. 1603. So at that time the ruler is James I, and he is from the which dynasty? Stuart dynasty. So he was ruling England, and after the death of the last queen of Tudor dynasty, he did not want the parliament to question him. So he believed that he should have the absolute powers. Parliament should not ask him any questions. And the king were given by the king, the power to this absolute power to the king was given by the God, he believed. So the king ruled by that divine right. What is a divine right, children? That God has given him the absolute power. So that belief is the divine right. Therefore he believed that king should not be controlled by the parliament, and he doesn't owe any responsibility to the parliament. Even parliament also should follow the king's rule. That is what he mentioned. So James I was succeeded by another king called as Charles I. After James I, it is ruled by Charles I. So Charles I dissolved the parliament. Entire parliament he dissolved. There is no need of parliament, he believed. So, and ruled for 11 years without any parliament. But in 1640 there was a need for money. So if he needs money, he has to increase the taxes. So for some reasons, in order to fight some wars, he needs money. There was no money in the treasury. So he was forced to again summon the parliament, which he dissolved 11 years back. He summoned the parliament to get the special grants. The parliament continued to function for the next 20 years, and this he called it from 1640 to 1680 the parliament functioned, which we call it as a long parliament in the history of Britain. For 20 years it continued to function. So the long parliament decided to control the powers of the king and the autocracy of the king and his ministers. The parliament punished the ministers and the officers of the Charles I. It stopped the working of the special courts and created by the king, and Charles I took advantages of these differences within the parliament and tried to arrest his opponents in the parliament. A civil war started between the parliamentary party and the king's party. The king has his own men in the parliament, so his men were considered as king's party, and people who wanted to restore powers to the parliament are called as a parliamentary party. So this lasted for 5 years, and untimely Charles I was defeated and executed in 1649, and England became a republic. However, this entire experiment, revolution went on. The Republican government was not very successful and did not last long. But in 1688, what happened? The William of Orange and his wife Mary, the granddaughter of Charles I, they were invited by the parliament to occupy the throne of England, and it was in the new system of government that ministers were answerable to the parliament and king had limited powers. That is the same kind of government which is being run today also, where all the ministers are responsible to the parliament and king will have only limited powers. They are only the head, but the entire power lies with the parliament. So this was the beginning of parliamentary democracy in England, and now the power of king and the divine right, those all were abolished, but it was granted by the parliament. Only the power which is granted by the parliament will be with the king, and all this has placed without shedding a drop of blood on the ground or firing a single shot. This transformation is known as the glorious revolution, or we call it as a bloodless revolution, because all this transformation has taken place without shedding a drop of blood. So you will also know about the glorious revolution did not end the power of the king or that of the old landlords. However, it created a system. It has created a system where the sharing of power between the king and the different segments has got started. So slowly the control came into the hands of the House of Commons, that is to the Parliament, which represented the middle class, and in this period only the people with land and property had the right to vote. And in the next class we shall further see and understand about the glorious revolution, children. Thank you.